Welcome to the Mary Beth Konis podcast. I'm your host, Mary Beth Konis. In this episode, we will define what rupture in relationship means and begin discussing the art of repair. We will answer questions like, what is rupture in the context of relationship? Is rupture in relationship normal? Why do ruptures keep happening? As always, make sure to subscribe and share and drop a positive review wherever you're listening. Y'all, it's happening. Today's the day. We're diving into, I would say, one of the biggest topics that I talk about. It's actually, we all talk about this. And so let's touch on it today. And this may be a couple episodes. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Okay. So let's dig in. Let's talk about the art of repair. So let me define this for you really quickly so you can know that you explore this all the time in your daily life, I'm sure. And this is the idea of in relationships, right? We all have relationships, and I am talking even with yourself. Sometimes that is the only relationship we have at the time. That's totally fine. All right. So this goes for your relationship with yourself, colleagues, your boss, your parents, obviously your partner, and most certainly your children. Okay. And everything else in between, friends and all that. And this is it. The point of building connection and establishing healthy dynamics and having fulfilling relationships is not to never have disagreements. The point is not to have this seamless, we never fight, we always think the same, everything is kosher and wonderful. That is never going to happen. All right. Not if two people or multiple people are being their authentic selves and allowed to be their authentic selves. So here's the deal with compliance or hierarchy or domination, where one person has more power than another person. Absolutely, that can happen where we all pretend that everything is fine all the time. All right. But I am talking about relationships that you want some form of equality, egalitarian situation happening. Okay. And for that, it is required, it is 100% necessary to learn how to repair after ruptures. And ruptures can be as small as you didn't put your socks away to as large as infidelity or lying or a change of direction in a relationship or someone's purpose, right? So it can be tiny little daily things, and it can be the biggest life-changing things. All right. Those are the ruptures. And the ruptures I would define as anything that creates tension between two people or three people or four people or the family, right? Okay. So that is, you can imagine, okay, if that's the definition of rupture, it's like that's happening all the time. It is very human and normal. I rarely use that word normal, but it is normal for every human to have a slew, a rainbow of feelings throughout the day. All right. And very often, that your rainbow of feelings is not going to be the same colors as the rainbows of feelings in the people around you. All right. So we have that established. We know what a rupture is. We know that they're normal and they happen to everyone on a daily basis. And they can range from very small, minor things to the most life-altering things. And so let's talk about repair. Very, very few of us know what repair is because our parents didn't know what repair was. And there was not enough research and education out there about relationships to even be taught about this. Okay. It's not necessarily logical or innate in the human biology to move towards repair. In fact, from a survival standpoint, our reptilian brain wants us to run away from ruptures. So, yeah, my avoidance, you know what I'm talking about. And even the anxious ones of us, and I'm talking about attachment theory there a little bit, avoidant anxious attachments. That anxiety is not actually driving us to connect, it's driving us to survive. So, biologically, we are wired to run away from repairing. That's important to remember because I need you to notice when there's been a rupture. I need you to notice how your body feels, what's happening in your mind, and the emotions that are coming up. I'll give you an example of how it feels for me. All right. So for me, when my children are, just needing all the things from me, and I don't have a large window of tolerance or space for that, I can be very irritable and moody and short and snippy. Okay. And what I have learned to recognize, and mind you, you can ask my kids if you know them and ever see them, this has taken years for me to master. And I wouldn't say that I've mastered it at this point. I'm getting every day, every opportunity for repair. I'm taking strides in the right direction. That's where I'm at. Okay. So it's still some of the greatest work of my life is mastering this biological pull to run the fuck away. Okay. I literally, my best friends, my closest people, they know I call them and I'm like, oh my God, I'm ready to run. I'm ready to run away. So my fight or flight response is typically flee, unless it's like an abusive, threatening situation, then for some reason I fight. So those are my two responses. And I've gotten very acquainted with my fight or flight response. I'm very aware when that is tripped and how it feels in my body and what emotions come up and then what thoughts rationalize all of it. Like, get the fuck out, babe. This is too much. You do not need to do this. Nobody needs to put up with this shit. This is too much for one person. La la la. All right. Which the truth is there's a little bit of truth in that. However, when you are in fight or flight, and the way you can tell is it's urgent. It is the most intense feeling, and it is emergency. It is right now. There is no window or space to pause and breathe. Okay. That's when you know you're in fight or flight, which you can imagine would come in very handy if it was an actual emergency. Okay. We don't need to pause and breathe and think really quickly. No, you just have to do it. Right. But when you're in a family dynamic or you're in a conversation, you're going to want to recognize, oh, wow, I have an intense urge to maul this person's eyes out and make them stop talking. Or I have an intense urge to run away and never come back and never finish this conversation. Oh my God, that'd be so great. Yeah. So that occurs for me on a regular basis, daily. Okay. Multiple times a day sometimes. Depends how much I interact with humans. So get really close with your response to threats. And what I mean by threats is anything that disturbs your peace of mind or your equilibrium. Okay. So, yeah, we know how often that happens throughout the day. It is your job to be very, very closely acquainted with those parts of you. And here's why: information is power. Data is absolutely necessary to make change. You got to have the baseline data. You got to know how this shows up for you to be able to make any tweaks and changes and approach it differently. All right. So years ago, I was noticing, it wasn't very hard to notice because I was screaming. I was noticing how often I was getting tripped into this fight or flight. And for when it was with my kids, and a lot of this happened when I was still married and in the abusive marriage. And then it, continued after he died and for many, many years after. And that was when I was in fight or flight, I knew I couldn't flee. So I would fight and I would literally scream at my kids, which is, you know, probably one of my deepest points of shame in the way I've shown up in this life. And I'm very acquainted with this shame, and I've learned to dance with her. And that's why I'm able to share publicly for all the world to hear, because I do think it's a pretty normal and common experience that parents have, is the shame of not being able to do better when you know better, because it's not that easy. It's not easy to just say, oh, I knew I should pause and breathe and only speak lovingly to my children. They're innocent in this. Yeah, of course I knew that. However, my own wounding, my own shadow parts were actually the things screaming. And I needed to meet those, which is very daunting and scary when you don't have the tools or the space or the support to do it. So I want to say all that because we cannot just sweep over this and say, every parent can do this, just do it. There's nuance there, and it's sacred, it's tender, it's raw, and it deserves some space to be honored and acknowledged for what it is. All right. So if you feel like you need support in that little space of parenting, please reach out. That is literally what I do as a mindfulness coach. I help people widen that window of tolerance. And you don't have to do that part of the journey alone. I needed some very practical tools to navigate that space and learn how to grow that capacity. And like I said, it took years of practice, and I'm still practicing it. So I say all that because so much grace and compassion as we are navigating parenting in real time and learning how to meet ourselves. All right, super important. Oh, and that ties in perfectly to the next point, in the rupture and repair cycle. And that is what you learn to do for yourself, you will automatically create space to be able to do with others. So, mamas and daddies out there, the more you do this emotional internal work and you pay attention and you practice the pause and you get new tools for navigating the fight or flight, freeze or fawn response, you are simultaneously creating that space in every single one of your relationships, not just with your kids, not just with your partners, but with your colleagues, with the strangers, with every single human that you interact with. Okay. Because when we meet ourselves in the darkest parts of our shadows, we reconcile all that pain and wounding that has just been scratching at the walls inside of us, screaming and wanting to lash out and project on everyone else. The way you calm that is by facing your shit. And it takes an immense amount of bravery and courage to do that. And like I said, support and tools. So if you don't have the support and you don't have the tools, that is when you want to get a coach or therapist who is educated in this kind of work. All right. There is no shame in asking for help. We were not taught how to do this growing up. It does not come innately with time or age. And so, how else will you learn a new skill unless you are taught, right? This is why we need coaches and therapists. So, let's end that first session on rupture and repair. And I really want you to think about, like, I want you to notice now that we've talked about it, now that it's on your radar, I want you to start observing what it feels like in your body when there is a rupture. And that means any tense, charged energy between you and another person. It's starting to come up, and I need you to recognize how that feels in your body. We will get to the other aspects of that, which is, is it me? Is it you? And is there a boundary that's being crossed? Do we need to say something? We'll get into that next time, okay? So start there. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm available via email, social media, whatever. You can find me. All right. Good luck.